The sun hung low and red over the Corinthian hills when the two riders crested the final rise. Behind them lay weeks of hard road, bandits in the border wastes, hungry nights, and the slow death of everything soft. Ahead, the land changed. Zamora. The girl who had been a princess sat her horse like she'd been born to it, gone were the silks and the careful coils of oiled hair, gone the rings and the painted nails and the voice that expected obedience. What remained was leaner, harder, a thing the road had filed down to a functional edge. She wore burgundy now, leather the color of old blood, scarred at the shoulders and elbows where it had turned steel meant for softer flesh. Snakeskin pauldrons rode her shoulders, mottled brown-red scales catching the failing light. Her boots were tall and road-black, her cloak the dull wine-dark of something that had seen rain and dust and the smoke of 100 camps. No crown, no jewelry, save one. On her left wrist, twin serpents coiled in gold. Their stone eyes caught the sun and held it, burning like embers against the burgundy leather. Ancient work, Acaronian work, the kind of thing that made sorcerers stop and stare, and then very carefully look away. She did not wear it. It wore her. Conan rode 20 feet to her right, blue eyes sweeping the tree line, the road, the distant sprawl of settlements that marked Zamora's outer reaches. His hand never left the hilt of his blade, the war axe slung across his shoulder like a yoke of iron and cosmic dread. He spoke without looking at her. One sleeps, one watches. Yasmila did not flinch. The weeks had burned that reflex out of her.
How long?
Her voice carried none of the crystalline court speak she'd once wielded like a weapon. This was flatter, functional, until the moon crests, or the sky grays, or the fire dies to embers. Wake me at any sound.
What if it's nothing?
Now he glanced at her, and something that might have been approval flickered behind the barbarian's perpetual scowl. Wake me anyway. She nodded once, no protest, no complaint. Conan grunted and returned his gaze to the road. He gestured south with his chin toward the haze of smoke and stone that marked the outer settlements. Zamora ahead, he rumbled. Everything before, easy.
I'm aware.
She shifted in her saddle, and the twin serpents on her wrist seemed to pulse with their own light.
Zamora is where things go to hide.
Or hunt. Conan's voice dropped. Cover the bracelet, cloth, cloak. If the wrong eyes see it, every soul seller in the kingdom tracks us. Yasmila pulled her cloak tighter, draping the fabric over her left arm. They rode in silence as the sun bled out. The place had no name. It squatted at the junction of two trade roads like a toad on a stone, low-roofed, narrow-windowed, the kind of establishment that asked no questions and remembered no faces. Lamplight leaked through cracks in the shutters. Voices murmured within. Conan dismounted first, scanning the perimeter with the slow thoroughness of a wolf scenting the wind. The stable, if it could be called that, was little more than a lean-to with rotting posts and a roof that had surrendered to the rain years ago. He led his horse to the hitching rail, secured the reins with a knot that could be undone in a single pull. Then, with deliberate care, he unslung the war axe from his shoulder. Eshnia Babarad. The weapon was massive, too large to carry on his back. It rode across his shoulder like a burden no man should bear. The crescent blade caught what little moonlight filtered through the clouds and bent it wrong. Crimson and white threaded through black metal that was not quite metal, pulsing with a light that came from nowhere and everywhere at once. The haft was as long as a man's leg, thick as a wrist, wrapped in leather gone dark with sweat and road dust. Conan leaned it against the back wall of the stable, propping it upright where anyone could see it and reach it. Yasmela had dismounted by then, watching him, her eyes narrowed.
You're leaving it?
Aye.
Someone could.
Let them try. His voice carried absolute certainty, no concern, no worry. She understood then. The weapon had chosen him. Rejected champions and sorcerer kings for 3,000 years turned them to ash and ember for the sin of presumption. Anyone fool enough to touch it without the right to bear it wouldn't live long enough to regret the mistake. It wasn't bait. It was a test the weapon would administer itself. Yasmela said nothing, pulled her cloak tighter, burying the twin fang in shadow and fabric, and walked toward the tavern door. Behind them, the war axe stood sentinel in the dark, waiting, patient, and profoundly aware. Inside, the air was thick with smoke, sweat, and the sour-sweet reek of Zamorian wine. A dozen patrons hunched over wooden tables, speaking in the low tones of men who did not trust their neighbors. Caravan guards, by the look of them, sellswords, traders who'd seen better roads and better times. Every eye in the room flicked toward them as they entered, assessed, measured, dismissed, or noted. Conan chose a table in the corner, back to the wall, clear view of the door. Yasmela sat opposite, pulling her hood low. A serving girl approached, gap-toothed and wary. Conan tossed a coin on the wood. Bread, meat, ale. The girl nodded and retreated, quick and quiet. The voices around them rose and fell like a tide.
Heard it from a caravan master out of Shadizar. Said the dead don't stay buried anymore.
Whole village just gone. Nothing left but bones picked clean.
Sorcerers are hiding, that's what I heard. Holed up in their towers, warding every doorway.
Yasmela's hand tightened around her cup. Conan's expression did not change, but his eyes sharpened, cataloguing every speaker, every word. An older man at the next table, gray-bearded and missing 2 fingers, leaned toward his companion.
Not just hunting, eating. My brother's a guard in Yezud, Temple District. Says 3 mages vanished last moon. Found one of them 2 days later.
He lowered his voice.
Nothing left but the robe and a stain on the floor, like something drank him.
His companion, a Shemite by his braids, shook his head.
It's the veil, thinning. Whatever's on the other side, it's pushing through. And magic!
He spat into the rushes.
Magic's like blood in the water. Draws them right to you. Then the sorcerers are finished.
The graybeard muttered.
And good riddance.
Demons don't stop at sorcerers, fool. You think they'll be satisfied with wizard flesh once they're through?
He trailed off. Silence settled over the table. Yasmela leaned toward Conan, her voice barely a whisper.
The undead. Demons hunting magic users. It's not just Conan.
No, Conan rumbled, his voice flat as an executioner's blade. The veil tears everywhere. The serving girl returned with their food. They ate in silence, listening. Around them, the tavern muttered its fears into the smoke. Outside, night came down like a hammer, and somewhere in the dark, things that should not walk, walked. The silence inside the nameless tavern had grown heavy. Conan ate with the economy of a man accustomed to rationing, his focus split between the muttered terrors of the Zamorians and the low, insistent hum he felt through his spine, the pulse of the war axe waiting outside. Yasmela, too, was acutely aware of the danger. The gold serpents on her wrist were cold now, but the knowledge they brought was a cold dread. Power always drew scrutiny, and power like the Unmakers demanded a blood price merely for observation. Conan had just finished the ale when the tension broke. It was not a roar or a crash, it was a snap. Outside, the profound stillness of the Zamoran night fractured. Conan's head came up, his blue eyes sharp as granite splinters. He had heard the subtle shifting of sand and felt the displacement of air, the minute signs of a predator stalking prey. A moment later, he felt the absence. He knew what it was. A local thief, greedy, clumsy, and too focused on the value of the axe's exotic metal to heed the inherent wrongness of the weapon. The thief had likely reached the stable wall, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against the promise of untold plunder. His fingers, calloused, trained for silent robbery, had slid across the leather haft of Eshnia Babarad. And in that instant, the blade administered its test. The Unmaker had chosen Conan because he intended to wield. It had vaporized the thief in Shar Iblis because he intended to take. The result was the same in the humid night of Zamora. Erasure. Where the man's hand had touched the haft, he simply ceased to be. No scream, no flame. One heartbeat, a life fueled by greed. The next, a handful of warm ash scattering across the stable yard. The act of erasure, however, released a brief, violent ripple of dimensional energy, a silent, searing white flare perceptible only to those attuned to the cosmic weave. "It is done," Conan stated, rising in a fluid motion that overturned his bench. His voice was flat. Yasmela was already on her feet, the gold bracelet exposed as she yanked her cloak back.
The axe?
"A fool. He failed," Conan said, already moving toward the door. And the shudder that followed called to something else. The low, frantic whispers inside the tavern died instantly. The other patrons had heard nothing but the crash of Conan's bench, yet the feeling in the air, the sudden crushing cold that followed the dimensional ripple, told them that something far worse than a bar brawl was upon them. Outside, the darkness deepened. The air, thick with the scent of spices and rot, now carried a new, chilling odor. Dust and old bone wrapped in formaldehyde. A high, thin, keening sound rose from the alley across the road, far too inhuman to be a mere Zamoran thug. Conan shoved the tavern door open with his shoulder. Yasmela followed, the crimson scales of her pauldron glinting in the dark. The stable yard was quiet. The war axe stood sentinel where he left it. Beside it, on the dusty ground, lay a small pile of grey, particulate ash where a greedy thief had just stood. But the focus of the night was not the ash. Around the corner of the stable, stumbling into the dim torchlight, came the threat. They were corpses, but not the slow, shambling dead of a common crypt. They wore the rotten silks and splintered armor of Zamoran noble guards. Their eyes glowed with the cold, hungry malice of entities newly possessed, and their hands were not seeking gold. They were reaching for the heat of the life within. And leading them, a hulking figure wrapped in tattered velvet, his skull bare, his jaw unhinged in a silent, ravenous laugh.
Demons don't stop at sorcerers,
Yasmela whispered, pulling the twin fang bracelet tight.
They come for the magic itself.
Aye, Conan grunted, finally reaching for the Unmaker, his gaze already locked on the bone-white army spilling from the dark alleys. And now we get to tell them the principle of correction starts here. Conan stood, the massive silhouette of the Unmaker looming over his shoulder. Before them, the Zamoran dead, pale and hungry, spilled from the dark alleys. The sight of them, common corpses animated by base parasitic entities, filled the barbarian with grim contempt. He reached for the war axe. The moment his fingers touched the haft, something stirred in the black metal, not heat, not sound, but a thing older than either. Recognition. The weapon had felt his intent, not to fight, to move, to carry this burden north through the brutal expanse that lay between. The war axe was too large, a thing for standing ground, for cleaving through ranks of armored men, not for the long trek through mountains and frozen wastes that lay ahead. And the Unmaker, ancient and aware, agreed. The metal shuddered beneath his palm. Conan's grip tightened as the haft began to shrink, the strange substance that was neither obsidian nor steel, flowing like black water, reshaping itself with a sound like bones grinding in a tomb. The great crescent blade folded inward, collapsing upon itself, and the cosmic wrongness of the weapon did not diminish, but concentrated, drawn tight as a strangler's cord. The crimson veins threading the black surface pulsed faster, brighter, as if the thing's heart were racing with the effort of compression. Within 3 heartbeats, the war axe was gone. In Conan's fist, a blade. It was long as his forearm, the edge wicked and leaf-shaped, splitting at the tip into twin points like the fangs of some primordial serpent. Down the center of the blade ran a spine of fused bone, or something that resembled bone, each vertebra distinct, and between them bled a light like molten iron seen through cracks in cooling slag. The same spiral glyphs that had marked the axe head were etched into the obsidian surface, burning faintly with that sourceless inner fire. The grip fit his hand as if it had been made for him, and perhaps it had, in that instant of transformation. The material was warm against his calloused palm, warm as living flesh, though the night air bit cold. Eshnia Babarad, the Unmaker. The principle of correction made steel and spite, compressed, portable, still profoundly aware. Conan stared at the weapon. He had not asked for this. The blade had simply known, had read his need in the tension of his muscles, the set of his jaw, the northward cast of his gaze. It had reshaped itself to serve their purpose, and that knowledge sat cold in his gut. A sword was a tool, a thing of dead iron that did what a man's arm commanded. This was something else. The horde advanced, dozens of corpse shells wearing the tatters of Zamoran nobility, a parody of the living. Their limbs jerked with parasitic hunger, their eyes lit by stolen malice. Behind them, the hulking velvet-wrapped giant hissed, jaw yawning wider than any bone should dare. Conan glanced once at Yasmela. She was already ahead of him. Her arm rose, the twin fang bracelet erupting in molten gold. The sigils along her skin shimmered, coiling, awakening, remembering what they once devoured. Fools and filth, Conan muttered. He shifted his grip on the freshly forged Unmaker, its molten lines dimming, vertebrae relaxing, and slung the blade across his back. The weapon locked into place as if the spine of the world itself had carved a sheath for it, pulsing once in quiet recognition.
Not worth the swing.
Yasmela's voice cut the world open.
Let the price be paid swiftly.
She inhaled, drawing fire and frost into her lungs like a queen breathing in her crown. Then,
Ishkandrel Moruveth, consume.
The tavern roof buckled as the air detonated with elemental verdict. The ground didn't tear, it snapped, as if fulfilling an ancient, unavoidable command. From the rift surged the twin serpents, Ishkandrel, Frost, a titan of absolute zero, its body a continent of shimmering void ice, breath crystallizing sound itself. Moruveth, fire, a star-forged behemoth of molten wrath, veins glowing like magma beneath obsidian plates. They did not roar. They hungered. The undead horde didn't even have time to scream. Frost and fire spiraled together into a vortex of contradiction, a cosmic maw. Silk, bone, parasite, corrupted breath, all erased in a single heartbeat. No gore, no ruin, no echo, only deletion. Pure, absolute, merciless correction. When the storm dwindled, two colossal heads lingered, one blazing, one frozen. Both bowed faintly to Yasmela, recognizing an ancient pact renewed. A final pulse of light, a last rattle of frost in the wind. Then the titans dissolved, leaving scorched stone, ghostly frost lines, and the scent of a world reminded briefly of its makers. Conan stood beside her, silent, the Unmaker resting across his back like a sleeping predator, its vertebrae glowing with the pulse of a held breath. And Yasmela, hand lowered, eyes lit with the power of the old tongue, looked into the void they left behind, unafraid. Inside the tavern, the silence was total. The Zamorian thieves, sell swords and caravan guards who had faced bandits and the common terrors of the night had huddled beneath their tables, waiting for the slaughter. They rose slowly, their eyes wide, their breath ragged. They crept to the door and peered into the stable yard. They saw the dark Cimmerian standing in the shadows, the spine blade strapped across his back, its bone lattice hilt rising above his shoulder, the vertebra faintly pulsing with dying amber light. They saw his eyes like banked fire. They saw the woman in the blood-colored armor, her gaze fixed north. They saw the patch of scorched earth and the lingering vapor. But what sank into their black hearts was not terror. It was the terrifying, undeniable knowledge that a power existed, a primal, elemental force that was willing to fight the rising darkness. They had seen the price of Conan paid. Now they saw the power of its vengeance unleashed. The thieves of Zamora, who lived by treachery and malice, had just been shown that hope was in play, and it wore the guise of a queen and a barbarian riding north. "The road is clear," Conan commanded, not sparing a glance for the petrified witnesses. "Let's move." Yasmela mounted her horse. They rode out into the Zamoran night, leaving the witnesses staring into the cold, clean emptiness of the stable yard. The whispers that would spread from that nameless tavern would not be of fear, but of an impossible, savage deliverance. While Conan and Yasmela rode toward the grim darkness of the north, Shakim rode alone into the east. He did not flee. He did not hide. When the dust cloud appeared on the horizon 3 days later, he watched it approach with the calm of a man who had already calculated every outcome. The riders wore lamellar armor and pointed helmets, carried curved tulwars at their hips. Turanian cavalry, hunting sorcerers by royal decree. To any other Hyborian, they were merely the king's hunters. To Shakim, they looked exactly like the armies that had swept through his homeland when he was 10 years old. The Mongol hordes burning his tribe's encampment, slaughtering his family, turning the steppe grass black with ash and red with blood. He had watched from behind his grandmother's skirts as the riders came. He had felt her hand on his shoulder, iron strong, as she pulled him into the dimensional gate and away from the screaming.